Tomb Raider, The Angel of Darkness, adapted from the novelisation by J.R. Millward, based on an original story by Murty Schofield. With J.R. Millward, with music by Peter Connolly and Martin Iverson. Episode 5.
The Musée du Louvre is one of the biggest and most illustrious cultural centres in the world. Every period of human history is represented in some way within its galleries, mysterious civilizations betrayed by immortal super-bitches notwithstanding. Its foundations as a 12th century fortress are still intact, amid rambling additions and annexes, constructed and occupied by more kings, generals and political figures than any revolution could comfortably accommodate. Within the Louvre are some 35,000 artefacts, paintings, sculptures, drawings, tapestries, prints, carvings and assorted cultural items, and those are just the ones on general display. It's been called the Palais du Louvre, the Grand Louvre, and simply the Louvre. To me, it will always be filed under raging temptation. I woke after my allotted 5 hours' sleep, having spent the better part of the afternoon plotting my escapade from an abandoned squatter's apartment in the seedier part of town. My weapons were all cleaned and oiled. The mudded, ruined remains of my denim suit lay sealed in a waterproof bag and shoved well out of sight under half-rotted floorboards. My last act while still wearing it was to purchase some cereal bars, drinks, and a few other essentials from a run-down little corner shop. I'd found my hidey hole, secured myself with a few crude but well-placed booby traps, and, after double and triple checking my gear, ate a frugal meal of cold soup, bread and cured ham, fell into a pile in the corner, and slept. My dreams were disturbing, but faded beyond recall moments after my internal clock sounded its alarm. I roused myself in the gloaming hours as the city lights began sparkling. In the dark and the silence, I dressed for action, breathing in focus and expelling tension as I worked. It's a little ritual I like to go through just before I do something crazy, but rituals of all sizes have power. On went camouflage trousers, buckled and belted with black webbing holsters, then a dark stretch top, over which I threw a sleeveless army-issue jacket with dozens of handy zip pockets. My boots were up to the knee, and surprisingly light for their toughness. I rebraided my hair and tightened on a pair of fingerless gloves to improve my grip. Finally, I slung the backpack across my shoulders, adjusting it for comfort until I barely knew it was there. If you ever have the chance, I'd recommend you visit the Louvre. Try taking the number 27 bus, or use the metro. You can enter via the Great Glass Pyramid, play in the fountains, and take cute photographs of your friends gesturing behind each other's heads. Do not, under any circumstances, follow the route I used that night. I sloshed through knee-deep water under the Pont du Carrousel bridge. I hugged the walls and tried to think inconspicuous thoughts as I hunted and found the outlet marked on Wren's map. I wished I'd brought flares as I went down on hands and knees in the pipe, feeling algae and God knows what cling to me as I squeezed past. Why are we doing this again exactly? Oh, if you don't like the scenery, Lara, you can always shut up. I mean, what's not to like? Picturesque views, charming locals, like we need a tour guide to show us around. You know, I'm getting pretty tired of being merely a sub-part of your inner monologue. It would be a lot easier if you started crediting me with some autonomy. Such as... What the hell do you mean? You're my subconscious. You don't have autonomy. Exactly my point. You can think of loads of times when I've saved our collective ass, or noticed something you've been too preoccupied to see until much later on. I pull my weight, don't I? So, let me get this straight. I'm trying to give myself permission to have multiple personality disorder because it's good for survival's sake. Gosh, and I was so worried about going insane without noticing. Just give it some thought. I want you to realize all the potential assets you're toting around, that's all. There's a lot more in here besides wobbly grey matter. Remember what Horus and Putai said about you having untapped resources? If we're going to avenge Werner's death, wouldn't it be a good idea to start using them? Fine. I'll call you Margaret. Pardon? Margaret. It's easier to think of you. Damn. Me. No, you. If I give you a separate name. Got a problem with that? It's not very tough, is it? After Great Aunt Margaret. Remember? The only person in our family who actually gives a damn about our welfare. Who loaned us the manor, who recommended Winston, who... Okay. Whatever you wish, oh mistress. At least make it Maggie, so that we don't get confused about who we mean. Heaven forbid. I'd hate to think I was confused. I entered a low hallway, claustrophobic and dim, but most definitely made for humans to navigate. I ran my hands over the crumbling brickwork, streaked with mould and mildew. The air was chilly, but quite fresh, with none of the rank overtones of sewage to contend with. That said, there was plenty of rubbish floating in the scummy water, and the squeaking of rats was uncomfortably loud. It was cool enough for me to start shivering in my damp clothes. I got out the map and wandered down the passage, crunching on gravel until I came to the source of the noise. I entered a tall chamber, with water descending in a never-ending haze from pipes vomiting forth from the walls. A relatively dry patch on the rim gleamed in neon tide lights around a control panel. Warning signs plastered the valves, like overgrown wasps. Their yellow and black stripes faded under blotches of powdery fungus. The indicators humming in front of me all shone hazardously scarlet. But with a little jiggery-pokery, I wrenched the valves closed, the rusting metal sounding like a manicure addict at a mathematician's convention, and all of the indicator lights flashed green. The water immediately shut off, and I heard the boiler room door lock open above me. What? If you build a storm drain, the first rule is always put the doors above the flood line. It's perfectly logical. It took some climbing, and the ladder rungs set into the wall were mostly broken or rusted to brown crumbs, but eventually I hauled up and unlatched the boiler room door. Oh, it's the right place, all right. My inner thoughts voiced my reaction far more clearly than I could have spoken aloud, with my hand clamped tight to my mouth to keep from inhaling the fumes of diesel and gas. My brimming eyes scanned the room until they located a great chimney-like pipe on the far wall, beyond an open outflow tank the size of a public swimming pool that rippled sluggishly under a sheen of combustible fuel. The pipe was thick enough for me to have swum down, although that would have meant I was swimming in pressurized, superheated gas. I cross-referenced the pipe against the map. The chamber I had chosen as my entry point was directly behind the wall. I cast about me, weighing my options. High explosives would do the job, but they would blow me to kingdom come if I was in the same room. This is it. You better let me concentrate. If I get this wrong, you won't be around to bug me about it. Before I could talk myself out of it, I plugged a fist-sized lump of C4 and its trailing detonation wire behind the pipe. I set the timer for 5 seconds and leapt over the low guardrail into the tank. My eyes and mouth were clamped tightly shut as I swung down for all my life was worth. Oil stung my eyes as I looked up, seeing flames brawling on the surface. I kicked myself over to the pipe openings in front of me and breathed a lungful of grateful air when I emerged, less than a minute later, in a side room, its waters protected from the incendiary blast. Slightly lightheaded and dripping, I stomped back to view my handiwork. The air had gone from cold and clammy to oven roast, take your eyebrows off hot. It must have taken mere seconds for my clothes to dry out as I hopped, skipped and jumped over the patches of flame till I fell through the gap in the wall, basking in the cool grey beyond. I had emerged exactly where I planned, in the sub-basement next to the original foundations. Huge wedges of mortared limestone, faintly purple in the half-light, rose on my right, roped off from the general public. There was a hush on the room, such as you find in libraries and strict churches. There were footlights at the base of the walls, glowing more softly than fireflies on a summer's evening. I checked myself over, rubbing a gentle salve onto my tenderized skin and popping the tube back into its pocket. With great care, I also loaded the tranquilizer dart gun and bug zapper. There would be plenty of guards between me and my destination, and the fewer casualties I inflicted, the better. A panelled mahogany door beckoned me on. Here goes nothing. Museums, like schools, airports, stations and shopping centres, feel utterly wrong when they're empty. There's something about the vitality of a crowd that gives these places life, movement and energy. Take that away, and even the most impressive location will feel like a mortuary. Even if you have permission to be there, you feel a strange sense of disquiet, of trespassing beyond the bounds of normality. That was how I felt as I entered the Louvre galleries. The tourists had long since gone home. Cleaning staff had emptied the rubbish bins, polished the floors and closed up for the night. The lights in the corridors were extinguished, save for tiny spot lamps, and I knew from prior experience that the main galleries would be limited to only a handful of red uplighters to help preserve the paintings from photonic damage. It was a whole nother world to the one most people get to see. Zapper drawn, I ghosted up a flight of broad steps, listening intently. The steep corridor was divided by several minor exhibits. One, a rather nice piece of Egyptian bas-relief, with a handy "You Are Here" map below. I heard a noise other than my own footsteps, paused, pressing my back into the wall, and concentrated. The man who came round the corner fell without ever even seeing me, his body flopping as the electric shock sent his limbs into spasm. I swept him against the wall, propping him up and checking his airway was clear. His glasses had fallen off, but not broken, and his laminated name tag read Philippe Roux, matching his faded red hair. His eye beneath its lid dilated reassuringly, but he wasn't going anywhere for a long time. My eyebrow rose appreciatively. Wren knew his weaponry. At the top of the stairs was a door which opened onto a gallery a whole battalion of art enthusiasts could have gotten lost in. Ye gods, it made my gym look small, and I didn't decorate my sports hall with Da Vinci's and Van Goghs. A comforting red glow rippled across the parquet floor, shining off glass cabinets. There were even a few cushioned stools for people to sit and admire the artworks. The place smelt like liberal amounts of pine polish. A reproduction of Leonardo's The Last Supper graced the far wall, taking up the whole expanse from floor to ceiling. It took me a second to realise that one of the figures at the base of the painting wore a guard's uniform. His face was frozen in surprise, but his hand was already going for his gun. I had crossed the distance between us before the weapon was out of its holster. In one swift gesture, I broke his forearm, twisting him round with my momentum and neatly depositing him on the floor. Before he could cry out, I had tapped him smartly, punching his ticket to the land of happy knockouts. Hey, I've had a broken arm and they hurt like hell. It was the kindest thing to do. Nice work. Now, if we can just find Carvier's office, we might be able to get to the dig site and avoid a career in boxing. Thanks. You were a great help. A fine sweat beaded my forehead, running in an irritating line down my neck. The galleries were warmer than I'd expected. Oh, well, if it's help you want, you might try searching his pockets. You might find his security pass. Good thinking. You're welcome. Say, haven't you noticed something? You've completely forgotten about that man we saw leaving Wren's pawn shop. Don't look at me like that. I only just remembered it myself. Strange, isn't it? You think he had something to do with the murder? I don't know, but I'd bet a new quad bike he wasn't just a customer. The circumstances are suspicious enough, but apart from that, he felt wrong, evil. Just keep me posted if you figure something out. I'm rather busy here. I was walking along, my zapper drawn, its tip constantly moving, not focusing in any particular direction. My exploration had brought me to a new hallway. Thin columns of pearly marble supported the vaulted roof, and Grecian statues of goddess-like proportions stood facing each other down the hall's length. Windows along the far wall cast squares of wraith-pale moonlight across the floor, but could not distract from the dots of red light hovering at intervals along the walls and columns. Damn security and their damn laser trap fixations. I kept low, sucking in my chest to slide past the invisible beams on the far wall. Not for the first time, I wished I had smaller assets, if only to make my job easier. They do get in the way sometimes. At the far end of the hall, my way became clearer. Someone had taken the trouble to erect a notice board. This being the Louvre, it was a very posh notice board, detailing the recent archaeological work being undertaken beneath the museum's foundations. However, the actual entrance, set nearby on its own little alcove, was very clearly not for public use. The basic card in my pocket wouldn't open it. The remaining wad of C4 in my backpack itched, but would have attracted far too much attention. I needed Carvier's security pass. Her office wasn't as difficult to find as I might have thought, and I didn't run into any more than a couple of guards the whole way. The Department of Medieval and Renaissance Research turned out to be in a much more contemporary complex than most of the Palais, adjoining the historic building in the manner of upmarket universities that try to preserve the past whilst working to the future. Personally, I quite liked the mix of old and new age industrial styles, flashing past as I stalked down richly carpeted corridors. Ordinary office doors with their own little plates displayed titles like oils restoration and X-ray and spectral imaging. I pulled up outside the one marked private, security personnel only. There was a single guard inside, lounging in a chair facing banks of CCTV monitors, a half-eaten pastry and cooling cup of coffee cluttering the desk. He never even heard me coming, but jolted and then sighed dreamily as I applied the same neck grip technique as I had on the goon in La Serpent Rouge. Hey, if it's good enough for Spock, it's good enough for me. Swiftly and silently, I deactivated the cameras to Carvier's office. I used the generic pass on the door and sighed with relief when the locking mechanism flashed green to admit me. Well, Madame keeps a tidy office. You mean kept. Let's see what we can find. Carvier had carried over her scrupulous domestic habits to her working life. The office was immaculate and beautifully equipped with both antique and super-modern furnishings. Mahogany, rosewood and darkly stained oak predominated, and the rug in front of the modest fireplace was a genuine Persian. I moved closer, drawn to the paintings above the mantelpiece. The largest and most prominently displayed was of a man, naked and bound in a manner reminiscent of a crucifixion, except that his arms were restrained by his sides and a leather hood concealed his features. A Germanic-style castle lurked in the background. The whole ensemble disturbed me greatly. I picked up a book that had a notepad for a bookmark. The clipped, precise handwriting could only have been Carvier's. The Obscura paintings. 5 images painted on thick wooden bases. Similar to Russian icons then, I guess. They were created by the black alchemist Peter van Eckhart in the 13 or 1400s. The paintings were seized by the Lux Veritatis and painted over with religious imagery. Each painting has a metallic symbol of power built into it. Together, the 5 paintings hide something called the sanglyph, or the blood sign. I wonder what that does. Eckhart, the same name as Werner's client. Bit of a coincidence, wouldn't you agree? There's more here. Look, on this desk. The 5 Obscura engravings. The Lux Veritatis monk, Brother Obscura, is alleged to have painted over the Black Alchemist's original paintings with innocuous religious imagery before the paintings were hidden. However, he made undisclosed, sketched copies of the paintings that contained encrypted maps to each painting's secret location. These sketches became known as the Obscura engravings. This is what Werner was talking about. He mentions all of this in his journal. Matthias Vasily in Prague has sent me 4 Obscura engravings. He kept the 5th engraving back, deciphered the encrypted map in Vasily's engravings. One of the paintings is beneath the Louvre, where the latest archaeological digs are. He must have been led here by one of the original Obscura engravings, which means exactly. If Vasily and Werner were right, then one of the Obscura paintings really is here, right now, beneath our feet. We have to get to those diggings before anyone else does. My heart pounded, and it was an effort to swallow. After a brief search of her desk, I unearthed Carvier's security pass lurking in the back of a drawer. It was odd. For the first time since Werner's death, I felt like a thief, despite having stolen odd bits and pieces throughout the day. Perhaps it was because I had already met Carvier, had been in her home, and understood something of her style. My lifelong archaeological recoveries had never elicited this reaction, even when their centuries-dead owners protested my acquisitions. Warily, I crept from the office, descending the stairwell at the hall's far end. My shadow wove across the walls from the lights shining up through the grilled steps, and the clank, clank, clank of my footsteps struck me with notes of definite anxiety. I met no one as I returned to Gallery 3 and the locked door leading to the digs. Carvier's pass, her photograph unsmiling, felt heavy in my hand. Above the ever-present floor polish, I could just about make out the odour of freshly dug earth. Faint, but too emotive for me to ignore. Time to raid. Let me make perfectly clear to anyone who has never actually studied the practical side of archaeology. Most of the time it's dirty, frustrating, and duller than ditch water. In Britain, fieldwork is traditionally carried out on a soggy Thursday afternoon, with rain dripping down the back of your Macintosh and cows in the next field eating your sandwiches when you're not looking. And all you'll have to show for 9 hours' work are some rusty lumps that may, or may not, be Iron Age arrowheads. If this idea does not appeal to you, I suggest sticking to watching Time Team from the comfort of your sofa. On the other hand, the Louvre digs may have convinced you that archaeology is worth the fuss. The passageway had led me down into the basements. A series of arc lights and whirring computers guarded armoured doors that had yielded to Carvier's swipe card with a juddering rumble, throwing up a gritty cloud of dust. In the shallow gloom beyond, my eyes had widened to behold a vast pit behind chain-link fence. A pit deep enough for 4 or 5 African elephants to stand on each other's backs and not reach the surface. Overhead, an assemblage of steel girders held up the roof and air conditioning units. The only illumination came from sodium work lamps, dotted every few metres or so, and the impartial fuzzy glow from frosted porter-cabin windows. As I stalked along the perimeter, the door to the nearest cabin opened and a guard hopped out, his shoes scuffing the gravel, not seeing me as he turned to lock it. I was on him in moments, adding one more to the Louvre pyjama party. Dan stopped, looked up. His buddy was watching me from an open-sided tent not 5 paces away, too shocked at his colleague's swift dispatch to even draw his weapon. I looked from him to the body, and back again. Excusez-moi. I dashed across and caught him under the chin with a flying kick before he could stutter into his radio. He moaned several times, not entirely out, so I propped him against a plastic chair and held him firm until my pincer fingers sent him off playing with the fairies. His baseball cap had fallen off in the struggle, and he would have a handsome set of bruises to show his boss when he eventually revived. I planned on being long gone by then. Unmolested, I strode to the edge of the pit and swept my professional eye over their work. A stone tower, taking up one entire side, had been painstakingly cleared of silt and rubble. Scaffolds had grown up the pit like crazy man-made creepers. About midway down, a curious round panel seemed to spin in the tower's flank, like the interlocking cogs of a giant pocket watch. The panel was of age-blackened wood, as wide as I was tall, and symbols like living gold were etched into each ring, flashing and catching the light in disturbing shapes as the rings revolved. Well, well, well. What had they found? Satisfied that I was alone, I searched the cabins, munching on one of my energy bars and sipping from my water bottle as I went. The first cabin was only the generator housing and maintenance shed, but the second held far more interesting prizes. An on-site office, complete with scanner and notice boards, had been shoehorned into the cramped space. I pulled up a swivel chair and perused the charts and doodles scattered across the desks. I recognised Carvier's handwriting. There's information here on the Nephilim, the supposed hybrid descendants of angels and human women who flourished in Turkey in early biblical times. Yes, I knew I'd heard the name before. Father Patrick mentioned them once when I was bugging him about my theology exam. Genesis, the mighty ones of eternity, the people of the Shem. And in Numbers 13:33, he said that many scholars thought that Nephilim might have been the basis for later myths about giants or demigods. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, which come of the Nephilim, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. But what has an ancient biblical myth got to do with 14th century paintings? Maybe Father Patrick knows. Is there anything else here that might help us? Hold it! These look like the symbols on the cogwheels. Someone has tried to translate the markings. 4 markings in this order. Crescent moon, male symbol, dot within a circle. Hey, that one looks like a carrot. This is easy. Concentrate, Lara. Let's see if it's right before we jump to conclusions. I vaulted the chain link fence and stood, judging distance against muscle power, before I launched off and rolled to an awkward landing on the platform, immediately in front of the great cogwheel. The bottom of the pit yawned, like a lion deprived of a juicy morsel. A miniature JCB was parked up amongst a crowd of buckets and mud-caked wheelbarrows, with nothing but poles and corrugated iron sheeting keeping the walls from caving in. The floor was bare flagstones, perhaps part of an old road. Hell of a way to break a fall. The boards creaked as I stepped up to the cogwheel, and something strange happened. It's slowing down. One by one, the revolving rings came to a stop. I heard a hollow rattle, like a snake's warning hiss, and a wooden frame attached to a spring-release handle seemed to melt right out of the wheel. The frame aligned itself with a row of 4 symbols, and it was instantly clear that moving the handle would shift the rings around to display a new combination of markings. The whole edifice seemed to wait, expectant. Only then did I exhale. I hate feeling like I'm being watched. Knock, knock. I gave the handle a gingerly tug. It took all my strength to heave it down, hanging my full weight from the bar until each revolution was complete. The noise of each turn made me think I was winding God's own grandfather clock. The clanking and grinding was almost too loud to bear. Finally, the 4 markings in the frame matched the combination Werner and Carvier had deciphered. With a snap and a hiss, the frame withdrew, dissolving back into the wood, but leaving the chosen symbols burning like dragon eyes, charring the wood black. The ground trembled uneasily, but I straightened my back, showing no fear as the wheel turned in on itself, like the petals of a lotus flower. The edges pointed at me, displaying deadly sharpness, and finally slid right into the stone tower. The hole it revealed, blacker than a sadist's heart, sighed as air rushed past me, smelling of neglect, age, and about 600 years' worth of bat droppings. I ducked inside and felt the air for helpful currents. But suddenly, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I glanced behind me, half expecting to see my stalker following me like a shadow. I waited, poised and listening for one breath, one footfall out of place. But there was nothing. For some reason, the very absence worried me more than actually seeing someone. Swallowing my fear, I stepped right into the opening, feeling the floor slope away from me into utter darkness. Stay up here if you want to, Maggie. But I could really do with your expertise wherever this leads. Like I have a choice. Come on, girl. Where's your spirit of adventure? Stiff upper lip and all that jazz, as Mr. Zip would say. Well, after all we've been through, what's the worst that could be down there? The stone abruptly gave way, dropping in a slope I could not possibly gain any purchase on. I was falling before my inner voice could answer, and laughing like a demon the whole way.
In episode 5 of Tomb Raider, The Angel of Darkness, Lara Croft was played by J.R. Millward. Written and adapted by J.R. Millward. Based on an original story by Murty Schofield, with music by Peter Connolly and Martin Iverson. Additional sound effects courtesy of www.freesfx.co.uk and the BBC. Produced by Stephen Millward. Lara Croft and Tomb Raider are the property of Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix.